All right, welcome back to the PHLY Sixers Podcast. Before we do anything, because I'm sick of getting dunked on by Kyle.
I knew it.
Go search on YouTube, PHLY Sports. Give us a subscribe. Make sure you hit that like button.
Oh, yeah. There we go. Podcast Bodner over here.
I'm sick of being dunked on by Kyle.
All right.
So make sure you do that. Other than
I'm going
that,
to give you a nice little round of applause.
Well, you screwed me up.
Little golf clap.
How are you two doing?
I'm doing well, man. It looks like Buddy Hield Nation has showed up for today's stream. We have a few comments already. Feed me, Buddy, from Luca. We have Ty saying the people demand Hield. So, I think Buddy is probably going to have to wait a little bit, but we are going to discuss the potential of a Buddy Hield trade.
I mean, I figured there's only two things being discussed in Philadelphia right now. Who's dating Taylor Swift and Buddy Hield? Buddy Hield is a little more in our wheelhouse. We'll leave the Taylor Swift stuff.
Speak for yourself. So real quick on Buddy Hield, do you guys think there has been a totally average player like Buddy Hield who has been constantly linked?
Constantly, his entire career. Yeah.
He's definitely the most prominent one. Yeah. But I do think we should... we could lead with Buddy.
We should just get right. I mean, we've started the podcast.
Let's get right. I mean, it's the biggest, news of the...
So this was from Shams Charania last night. After contract extension negotiations stalled out, Buddy Hield and the Pacers have started dialogue to work on finding a potential trade. He is, like you mentioned, somebody who is oft linked to the Sixers. Not necessarily even really linked, but discussed, because he is that high-volume shooter that I think everyone wants Tobias Harris to be. And that's probably a good lead-in point, because Tobias Harris, we're going to, A, talk about after Hield, and B, comes up a lot in these negotiations, or at least these discussions, because of the matching salary. Just started off generally, how do you feel about his fit and whether or not there's actually a chance this happens?
So I like Buddy in the sense that the guy can shoot the hell out of the ball. We were going through some of his numbers pre-show, and I made the comment that his overall percentages were a bit lower in some years than I thought. Like in my head, I thought, he's just 40% guy every single season.
A little bit of variance there.
And he's not that. But what I would say in his defense, which, he doesn't offer any defense, so it'd be the first defense Buddy Hield's ever played. He's a high volume guy. And I won't say he's often a high difficulty guy. Like I do think it's not a Kelly Oubre thing where he's just putting up horrible shots all the time.
He's putting up shots that he can make. They're just difficult.
They're shots in his wheelhouse. And I think Buddy just takes a ton of threes, and sometimes it's coming off a movement, sometimes it's in transition. The reason that his percentages are maybe slightly lower in some years, he was over 40% last year on good volume, just to be clear. But it's because he's taking some of the widest variety of threes of probably any guy in the league. I mean, a shot diet that I would say probably similar to somebody like a JJ Redick that was here in the past, that you can have him run through a maze of screens and it's going to be a lot of movement and he's going to square up and knock a lot of shots down. So I think there's always room for a guy like that on the team. I think the questions all come with what the hell else does this guy do, right? I think Derek probably has some pushback, or I just kind of see Buddy as he is who he is. I think Derek believes he has grown in some ways on offense, maybe a little bit as a passer and a guy who will share the ball, but I think defensively is an absolute nightmare.
No, he's not a good passer.
Yeah.
He's just gotten better. And I think that's important. It's not where I want it to be. You talked about his percentages, and for his career, he is a 40.2% three-point shooter. Last year, that was 42.5% on really high, well, not really high, but 8.5 attempts per game. Good volume. We just spoke the other day when we were talking about Oubre, that percentage is only part of it, and I think at times overstated. Give me the volume. Give me the lack of hesitation. Give me the shot diversity. All of that is going to put a lot of pressure on a defense. I like him as a shooter in every capacity.
Yes.
Off ball, off catch. He shot, where is it? As an unguarded catch and shoot player, he made 46% of his threes. That's a 69% effective field goal percentage. That is locked. That is Tyrese Maxey over the last couple of years.
It's insanely good.
Level.
It's really
very,
good.
very good. So you give him good shots. And I think this is one area where if James Harden were still someone you could pencil in, would be a really good fit offensively next to James Harden. I think when you put him next to maybe Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid and a bunch of average What are you laughing
So Gavin says it's time for me to apologize to Rich Hofmann. It looks like, is that an avatar of Rich for Gavin? I'm going to need some backstory on that one. I don't know where that came from, but look, what a flattery to have Rich as your profile picture.
Yeah, it's a good looking shot of me.
Even Rich for years has mostly had other people as his profile pic.
Yeah.
But Brown a lot.
Anyway, sorry, Derek. I wasn't trying to.
I have no idea.
It's just a really funny thing that popped
offensively,
up.
I worry a little bit. You look at when he was with and without Halliburton last year. He shot 3.5% higher and 3 attempts per 36 more when he was playing alongside Halliburton to create some looks. So I think he'd be a lot better next to Harden offensively than he would a couple of average passers in Embiid and Maxey creating shots. I'm being a little generous there. But defensively, there is not a pairing among Harden, Maxey, and Hield that I think could hold up in the playoffs. Like, they would get obliterated, and I think that's true regardless of whether or not we're including Harden or not in the future.
Do you guys know where Buddy Hield ranks all time in NBA three-point makes?
Is he top 20?
He's getting there.
Well, he's only
getting
30.
He's
30 years old.
He's
so.
made the 29th most threes in the NBA, and he is going to, if he plays 4 or 5 more years, he is going to, like, we're talking like top 10 of all time here.
Yeah, that's
Buddy Hield.
So I would say it doesn't surprise me in the sense that he's had seasons where he's taken 10, 11 threes per game. That's, even for a guy that we know has. We're getting interrupted by Gavin again.
There's someone begging for us to unblock him in our live chat. I feel like we might
Rich might have to do some searching for who Gavin is.
Include your Twitter name. I will unblock you during the stream.
Derek
we're
owns
basically
you.
begging people to watch, so we'll give you that.
I wouldn't go.
Derek owns you. That was like a real nice thing to say that day.
That's a deep cut.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that doesn't shock me.
Gavin, give me your Twitter handle. I'll unblock you.
The volume that Hield has had as a shooter has been significant from basically the moment he got to the league until now. Now, I think he found his way a little bit more as he moved on from his first team. But yeah, all the questions to Derek's point are everything else. It's the defense. It's honestly, I'm seeing a justice for Gav in the comments from Ty. Man, Gavin, this might be your lucky day. You're going to get unblocked, and this is going to be a monumental occasion. So as Derek and Rich go through Twitter and find which one of the hundreds of people that they need to unblock here.
I wonder how many people I do
unblocked.
I should go look.
Oh, look at that. All right. Maybe now Gavin can switch his profile picture.
Yeah, Gavin, can you switch the profile picture there? I think that's a fair trade.
We're really going off the rails today. So, Buddy Hield, to me, the big problem, if we're talking about this Sixers team and this situation and trading for him, is that he is not a guy historically that has hidden his emotions very well. When he's unhappy, the defensive stuff that's already bad gets worse. Like, he's a mental checkout guy, a low effort guy when he's not either on a team or with a coach or in a situation where he feels like he should be getting more. And the whole impetus behind this trade situation is that Indiana's not extending him. Well, I have bad news. He's not getting extended in Philadelphia. Like, even if they were to say, look, he's on an expiring, he's a guy who fits, we think he can value add to this team with his shooting, there's a decent chance that he comes here and learns they're not extending me and sulks through the year. And I know it's a contract year, so he's got all the incentive to go all out, but you're fighting who he's been his whole career, basically.
Yeah, this is also another instance where, like, if they had signed Harden to maybe, let's say, a 2 or 3 year deal, maybe at less than Harden wanted, but something they were okay with, and you weren't going to have cap space next summer, well, then maybe you trade whatever pieces you need to trade to get Hield because you're not worried about preserving that cap space. Yeah. But to your point, if he comes here and they're like, no, we're not extending you, well, how's he going to react? Can't imagine it's going to be good.
So, I mean, look, I get why people want him, though. That archetype, that works here. We have proof that works here. You mentioned J.J. Redick. I almost kind of respect J.J. even more, just considering, you're right, Kyle, he took kind of the harder shots. He was a movement shooter, and he was a guy that shot to the back of the baseball card every year. It was right around 40%. And you have somebody like Niang in the past couple years was also another one of those guys. Didn't move as much as those guys though.
Yeah.
Took tough shots, but they were catch and shoot sort of quick trigger things. As you mentioned, Buddy's moving. You know, he's taking pull-up threes in transition. He basically has had the green light those couple years. He can move too. And I think we have seen, both with Redick and Curry, now I know they're a little bit different, Joel Embiid with a smaller guard who can shoot, that works here. Like that is good offense. Yep. And Joel Embiid, you can say maybe he doesn't make his team better in some ways offensively. He makes those small guys who are willing to run around his screens.
Yes.
And you know, just he can pop open for kind of pick and pop jumpers. Look, and I think Curry and Redick were far different players. Like Redick was, you know, that was like warp speed. He was running as fast as he could at all times. Whereas Curry, he probably had a little more skill, but he was a little gun shy. He liked to get into
He's
the mid-range.
very deliberate too. It's like a methodical kind of walk into it sort of deal. And to your point, Redick he's just flying around everywhere.
And so I think Hield would probably be closer to Redick, right? Like he's definitely more of a runner than Seth is. You would hope. You mentioned his passing, that just playing in that environment with Joel, it just opens up easier passing reads. Joel tells him, hey, man, the guy steps over, just throw a little pocket pass to me, those type of things. I think it could work.
George Niang getting buried in the comments right now, by the way. The Niang's D was foul immediately.
Niang's a better defender than Buddy.
Yeah, I was going to say. So
I bring up George all the time and he gets roasted. I like George. I'm sorry.
I would say we're slightly biased towards George because he's good to work with, I think.
Well,
right?
definitely.
It's like great, good quote and all
Hilarious
that.
Hilarious
guy.
Yeah.
Also, just he was a valuable player on that team. I talked about it the other day. There are 82 game guys and 16 game guys, but 82 game guys are very valuable over the course of a long season.
Definitely.
And I think George more than proved his worth. And I think that's kind of the conversation with Buddy, right? It's like, I have no hope that he would be a guy in the playoffs that is like, you know, maybe he gets hot and he swings a game, but I think he's going to kill you on defense, right? Whether it's, you know, the off-ball attentiveness stuff, somebody just picking on him. But if he can swing some games with his shooting, you know, maybe it comes out in the wash. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's really part of it. Like, you know, we're comparing Seth and JJ. They were at least more attentive, smarter scheme defenders than Buddy is.
Yeah.
If Buddy was just a bad one-on-one defender, you could probably live with it.
Yeah.
Especially if you could, you know, put good-sized wings around them. Now, that's not exactly the Sixers' strengths right now. We just debated Kelly Oubre Jr. But, you know, he's such a tough player for me because he brings a lot of stuff. Like Rich, I value that off-ball movement and shooting a lot, especially next to Joel. But I also value like good decision makers with the ball and positional versatility on defense. So he's got like some things in quick trigger and off-ball shooting that I really value, and some things that it's like, man, it's really tough for me to live without those or with those deficiencies. He's a weird mix.
I do think it would be funny if Buddy were on the team, some of the post-game pods we would have where, you know, some nights it's 8 of 11 from 3 and he basically wins you the game. Other nights it's 1 of 11 from 3 and he shoots you out of the game because the defense is not there. And I do think his, you know, as Kyle said, I would wonder if maybe his year-to-year fluctuation would also happen on a game-to-game basis. That's true of every kind of three-point shooter. It's by nature, there's the variance baked in there every game, every week, those type of things. But yeah, I think he is a guy that in a lot of ways would drive us crazy as well. That said, though, like Joel Embiid, I don't think this gets mentioned enough. He's basically Daryl Morey. He's like, the other guy should be bombing threes here. I am sick of...
He's like demanding more from Maxey. Like he's like, Tyrese, please shoot more. We hear it all the time from him.
He said it like kind of jokingly to start. He's like not joking anymore too. He's like, we should be shooting 40 to 50 threes a game. He's like, that's why I shoot a couple of them. He kind of, I'm not sure I 100% believe this because I think he does like shooting threes. But sometimes he says, you know, when he does take 4 or 5 a game, he's like, well, the reason I don't like shooting threes, but the reason I take them is we're not taking enough as a team.
Yeah.
And he clearly kind of is simpatico with Daryl Morey in that, like, we need to bomb threes around me. That is worth more points, and that's how it goes. Buddy Hield certainly fits into that kind of idea there.
So I want to we're going to get to the machinations of a potential Hield trade, I think, in a second. But first, I want to talk about our good friends at DraftKings Sportsbook. Back with another week of football, and DraftKings Sportsbook keeping us in the NFL action. Great offers every single game day. Everybody must remember Monday Night Football for the Birds this week, so you have a stress-free Sunday, unless you're maybe putting some big wagers in at DraftKings Sportsbook. But if you do, you bet $5, get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Throw $5 down on any of this week's epic matchups, walk away an instant winner. And DraftKings isn't stopping there. All customers can take advantage. 2 new offers every game day this September. Football's more fun when you're in on the action. So download the app now and sign up with code PHLY. New customers can bet just $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, with code PHLY. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please pay responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. Licensee partner Golden Nugget, Lake Charles and Louisiana. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/football terms for eligibility, terms, and responsible gambling resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply.
All right, so I think after that, Rich and I have to carry the conversation for a little bit so Kyle can catch up.
Best one yet. I'm crushing the disclaimer. Let's go.
You did a nice job there, buddy. The one thought I have with Buddy is, you talk about Maxey and, the team being smaller and the defensive concerns. It really does go to show when Ben Simmons was a real basketball player and, a borderline all-star level player, Buddy Hield was the type of guy that you would go after, because all of those defensive concerns, they really didn't exist because Ben would guard the best player. And then you would have somebody who Ben would willingly pass the ball to and fire 11 threes per game. It was kind of perfect. And now, in a lot of ways, your offense makes a lot more sense. I think we saw that with the numbers last year. They are finally a top 5 offense. But when you have a smaller guard like Tyrese Maxey, building around him on the defensive end is a lot harder. And Ben was very unique in that way.
And Miles in the comments points out that his big worry would be the defensive glass if he was added. And quite frankly, that's already a concern I have with this team as constructed. We saw it be problematic in a lot of big spots last year. And this is probably a good segue into, what it would take or what a deal, how it would take form. I think a lot of people probably jump right away to I know Indy would be interested in Tobias Harris, but unfortunately, with the contracts, it would require a lot of outgoing money for Indiana and outgoing money that, frankly, the Sixers don't want, right? There's multi-year deals that they'd probably have to take on. I think I'm more receptive to Buddy as a general concept now because he is on an expiring deal. Buddy for 1 year at 19 is not going to kill you.
But I'm not sure you can look at it like that. Like you said, he wants an extension.
Sure, and I agree with that. But so if you're trying to do it so this is the cleanest path, the Sixers don't really have, they never really have mid-sized deals. The ones they have
are like Melton, who you want to keep.
It's D'Anthony Melton, who I'm not trading D'Anthony Melton for Buddy Hield, period, let alone with other stuff. So that's kind of the problem with the situation. It's not that Hield wouldn't make sense here. I think if you put him in the right role, and certainly with Joel, and if they go ultra big and play these Embiid, Reed lineups, you are going to have to juice that up with, listen, I know you're shuddering over there, but it's something that Nick Nurse is talking about. So I think if you do that, you're going to need maybe not Buddy Hield specifically, but they're going to have to find shooting through somebody other than Tyrese Maxey, or you're going to be in big trouble.
To your point on the contracts, the probably if it was a Harris for Hield type centered trade, it would probably be Tice, who's on I think he has a team option for next year, and TJ, who has a partial guarantee. It's a significant partial guarantee. It's like $5 million. Yeah. But there is some guaranteed money coming back for next year in that.
And $5 million next year, I know it's only $5 million in NBA terms, but for a team who their whole message right now is we want to keep the books clean, we want to chase after big fish, and quite frankly, it's going to be a lot of, they might try to trade for people next summer. Guys like we were talking about Levine yesterday, stars on other teams on big deals that under this new CBA, teams are looking at it and saying, all right, now's the time to cut bait. And so the $5 million, that's a pretty significant $5 million.
And trading someone into cap space is it's easier.
Yes.
It's easier. For sure. Yeah, and look, there's still ways that they can try to shed some more salary. PJ Tucker, you might look to trade maybe. Even Paul Reed, his deal's not guaranteed for next year. Now they would have to actually cut him before the playoffs, which I think there's a 0.1% chance of that ever happening. But theoretically, if you were all in on cap space, you can clear that contract off the books. Thanks to Danny Ainge for that weird provision in that contract. But yeah, I mean, it's to me, it just comes back to what kind of contract would Buddy want? And do you think, I think these two specifically, Tobias and Buddy, are the exact type of players who I think are probably in for a rude awakening when the new apron and double apron rules kick in.
100% agree.
So if Buddy is insistent on doing it now, I'm not sure he's going to agree to something to what he's eventually going to have to settle for next summer. So I worry about that.
Yeah, like I said, I wouldn't go so far as to say, he's a malcontent or anything like that, but I think you've certainly seen in the past there's like a downward trend when if it's his spot in the rotation or the amount of minutes he's getting, and you put real money in his livelihood in focus this season. I just think that you're potentially creating an even worse situation.
He's also another guy who not only has he not played on many winning teams, I would also argue he has not played on a lot of teams that play defense.
Yeah.
like I know that he is a big part of that, but he plays on these Sacramento. He played on Indiana last year. Those Indiana games were outrageous.
It's like 140, 133.
Rick Carlisle was trying the most ridiculous shit in the world, and Joel was just scoring 45 points. Now, they were scoring right back because Halliburton is amazing. Buddy can make threes, but I also kind of wonder, what happens when he plays for Nick Nurse, who's like, okay, defense is our thing here. That's what I am demanding from you. That is what I demand effort from on that end of the court. I will give you more freedom on the other end. I'm very curious to see how that happens, because I feel like we've been talking about a lot of guys who really haven't won a lot of games in their career. I don't know.
Yeah.
But look, the Sixers have. Tobias Harris has.
He has. And look, I guess that's probably a decent enough place to pivot, unless you have any more stray thoughts on Buddy, because Tobias Harris is almost like the antithesis of Buddy. He will sacrifice his role.
Yes.
He will play defense. He's a much better defender than Buddy. I know he's maybe not what you want him to be.
Tobias as your top perimeter defender, that's an issue.
Right.
Tobias as one of your perimeter defenders, perfectly fine as long as you have
If you could just
competence.
take Buddy's confidence and put it in Tobias Harris's body, even if you're not getting the shot diversity, just in terms of letting those catch and shoot shots fly, it would solve a lot. It would solve a lot.
Right. And that's the thing with Tobias, right? We've seen he's a good shooter in the aggregate, right? Over the course of his career, he's been a high 30s guy. And he should be more willing to live with 1 for 7, 1 for 6 type night. And too many times it's 0 for 2 or 3 for 4. Those are basically the two Tobias Harris games that you get from 3. And I'm not sure precisely what they can do to change that. I guess the only thing that comes to my mind is that Tobias historically, if you can get him into he likes to call it his flow early in a game, then I think you see him expand out to the areas that the team would ideally like him to operate from, right? If you give him, here's just a garbage mid-post touch, and you can go at this smaller defender.
It's a good way to describe it.
Well, look, they're just...
Rich can tell you, every time it happens, I just start
outside of Joel Embiid, those are just bad odds propositions, period.
They're mediocre odds.
Yeah, okay, mediocre.
But trending
odds
towards bad. I would agree. I would say watching them is bad. It's just not fun basketball to watch. It's a little closer to average on the aggregate.
Yeah, so it's the thing we've talked about several times already, where you're giving it to him less because this is a good basketball thing and more for the mental side of it. And if you give, with James Harden presumably not playing, if you give him more of those early, first quarter, second quarter, those type of touches, maybe he gets into a groove and he will take more of those, open corner threes or, elbow threes, whatever. that's the only real. You don't want him running lots of pick and rolls and things like that, right? Like he can do it. That doesn't mean he should. And Nick Nurse has indicated it seems like he wants to give him the opportunity to expand his role, but I'm not so sure how wise that ends up being.
Well, look, I feel heading into this season, which is just going to be a complete cluster F to start. I think we've always said, oh man, I can't believe Joel has to go through this again. Like I can't believe they are putting him through another season where his running mate is just like, I'm probably going to sabotage the season or I won't play at all. One of those two things. Part of the reason I have confidence in the Sixers weathering the storm is that Joel is he's close to 50 wins if he plays. I really, as long as it's not a complete train wreck of a supporting cast, and I don't think this qualifies in those terms, they're going to win games. Part of the other reason that I'm confident that this team is not going to be terrible is that, and you mentioned this either last pod or a couple ones ago, Tobias can scale up his game.
Yes.
He clearly can do that. Is it championship level basketball? No, it's not. But it's like you said, it's kind of like the 82 game versus
It's hold
16.
down the fort. We can win regular season games level of scaling.
He can soak up those possessions. And I think if you look at his stats, like Doc said at all times last year, I don't know if anybody has sacrificed more than him. Now, I think we could argue he probably should be sacrificing if you actually want to win a title. But Doc had coached him in Los Angeles and basically ran, 40 plays a game for him.
Yeah. No, I actually just looked this up while you guys were talking. At his last season with the Clippers, 26.6% of his possessions were in pick and roll. Last year, that was 10.7%. So we went from 26.6% to 24% to 15 to 10. Doc ran a lot of offense through him with the Clippers. Part of that was that they needed to, but he has changed his game a lot.
So I think those garbage mid-post ISOs, as we said, he can get you average play out of those. What do you think? It's 0.88
It's usually right around 0.95 actually. He's as a individual ISO scorer, he's actually pretty efficient. It's the fact that he doesn't create anything for his teammates out of pick and rolls, which traditionally are a good way to create shots, especially corner threes.
But in the meantime, while Daryl Morey says don't look at the roster and they're going to try and let this Harden thing play out, he is a useful guy to have to just make sure the ship doesn't completely sink. And I would also argue that in the locker room, he's a great guy to have.
He's not in the Kelly Oubre loser energy category.
No.
He's definitely a steady as he goes type of guy. And that is something that it can be overrated at times, but I think in this specific scenario, having him there is really valuable.
As a lot of guys, everybody kind of talked about the Joe and Ben and now the Joe and Harden relationship. Oh, is it good? Is it bad? Do these guys hate each other? I would say to the side of that, Tobias has generally been the team leader. He has been the guy who keeps the young guys who aren't playing, trying to keep them even keeled. He has good relationships with all of the key figures, Coach, Joe, all of those guys.
Yeah.
He is an important dude to have. The problem runs into if you are giving him, all of these mid-post ISOs, once it turns into the spring, it's okay, there is a definite ceiling on this.
Yeah. And I mean, to the point, all of these mid-post ISOs, please no, but one or two to start a game.
Sure.
I can stomach that if it gets him shooting 6 threes per game instead of 3.
That's all it comes down to. That's nobody here or in the Sixers organization is sitting there saying, yeah, we're going to start running the offense through Tobias. He's the guy. No, this is going to be, if James is not there, this is the Tyrese and Joel show, right? And very well should be. Tobias is just going to move up the pecking order now, right? Because James is leaving a potentially huge hole if he's not there. Even if they trade him and they pick up, guys with some creative talent who need the ball in their hands, I would probably think at this point, based on the potential return packages, they're not going to get a better individual creator than Tobias is going to be. You're going to get role players who sit in between all these guys. So he has a really important role to play. And, frankly, I think maybe we see that might be the big move they make this year is if their free agency options are limited and they get to February and say, we have indications that we don't think the guys we were hunting are coming. Maybe you cash Tobias's contract and whatever else you can sprinkle in there for value and take on one of those, Levine type guys. You never know.
His Ty in the comments, his entry passes are
awful.
So bad.
Yeah.
I mean, this team is really in general, entry passing.
But he's the worst.
Horrible.
He
is
big.
really bad.
Like, he shouldn't be bad at it.
Yeah.
It was.
He's so timid with it too. It's like he'll just sit there and do the.
Yeah, it's so bad. It also reminds me of his 3-point shooting too. Like the most frustrating thing, Derek frustrated by the mid-post ISOs. The thing that got me the most frustrated, a Tobias record scratch on a wide open three. It's just like
so many of them.
That just goes completely against how basketball is played now, and it just absolutely killed you. It was funny. I remember the game. I think it was against Memphis when they won right after the break. He had an unbelievable record scratch, and Harden made an insane three at the end of the shot clock just because he ruined the entire possession. And then he comes back and makes a three on the next possession. Tobias Harris and his 3-point shooting does not make sense. And if you guys remember, from mid-November to mid-December last year, he was making threes. Like he was
on fire.
He had a really good stretch, and I feel like I remember the exact moment. He hit a couple at the end of that Toronto game right before Christmas. And then he has the famous tell a friend to tell a friend type thing. It was essentially the Michael Lorenzen no-hitter because he stopped shooting.
Just nosedive.
Yeah,
right
he didn't even take them after that. So that's part of the issue with Tobias. He's never going to be a gunner. I wish he would be because I don't think he's a bad shooter when he takes them. He clearly works on it. Like we've seen in the practice facility. What did he have? Did he have goggles on of some sort that he was? trying?
He worked on all. Look, and that's the thing, right? To add on to what you were saying about the locker room stuff, he does put the work in. This is stuff that he has worked a ton on in the offseason. He's essentially told by Doc, like, look, we need you to do this. And I think to start every season, he comes in with the right philosophy and the right attitude. And he carries on that work from the offseason. But the deeper they get into a season, the more the old habits start roaring. It's just, it's a testament to how hard it is to fundamentally change how you play basketball.
Last 3 years, 38.3% from three, 3.9 attempts per game. It's just infuriating. It's got to be 6. There's no excuse. Go ahead, do your ad read.
Well, listen, if you want to go tell a friend to go see a sharpshooter, I know where you can go. You can use the GameTime app. The GameTime app's one of the fastest growing apps that we have here in the ticket marketplace. And look, you can get last minute deals to go see Tobias Harris, record scratch a 3. More likely you'd go to see Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid battle for a 50-point game, maybe a 40-point game. Be nice to start, and we'll ease our way into 50-point games the deeper we get into the season. But look, the GameTime app experience is really good. There are flash deals, last-minute tickets that you can get. There's a low price guarantee, event cancellation protection. It is the place for last-minute ticket deals. You don't have to plan months in advance. They have deals on tickets right up to tip-off or kickoff in football's place. I always bring up the theater. I don't know what their equivalent of tip-off is. Is that like they ring a bell or they turn the lights off or whatever that is? But suffice it to say, you can always get low-price tickets guaranteed and sent right to your phone if you use the GameTime app. So snag the tickets without the stress with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code PHLY for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code PHLY for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Tobias' 3-point shooting in the second round against tough opponents. Well, first round against the Celtics, I'm going to include. 2019 versus Raptors, 27.9% from three.
That series was ugly for him.
And by the way, like one of the biggest, we talk about last year, if Melton and Maxey make their threes in Game 6, if Tobias Harris makes his threes in Game 4 against the Raptors, I mean, that really swung the game, honestly.
2020 against Celtics, 13.3%. That was a year without Ben, so you kind of
that team was a disaster. So I'm willing to give him. And in the final game, if you remember, he got clocked in the head and still came back out and played.
2022 against the Heat, 33%. 2023 last year, 25.9%. And I feel like, look, On the one hand, I feel like he goes under the radar a little bit because people just don't have any expectations, and also because there's been various meltdowns of a real wide range of reasons. They just need more from him. And I really respect the way he's willing to adapt his game and take on whatever role they need. I respect what he is in the locker room. I respect the work that he puts in. And I respect how much effort he gives defensively, especially in the playoffs. They just need more from him. It's
honestly, sometimes he tries too hard on defense, and that's a cause of some botched switches, and he's trying to go somewhere that he shouldn't, and the communication's not there. But yeah, like it's a guy that, just from a neutral perspective, that you would like to see succeed because you know that he's trying to do all these things. I understand the frustration with the fan base is significant, and I get that. Guy's on a huge contract, and that has had major team building ramifications over the last, however many years. But it's really as simple as the guy needs to take more threes. And if Nick Nurse can just drill that into his head somehow, like, I don't care if you go 1 for 8 or whatever it is on a given night. You need to just keep firing. But that's not how he's wired.
That's
and
what
I don't
Doc
know
Rivers
how
is
you,
supposed to do.
Yeah, legitimately, he had his career year under Doc. When they replaced Brett with Doc, everyone said, all right, he's going to get back to Clippers Toby. He is who he is, I think.
Maybe we can do like a brain swap between him and Oubre. I don't know if that would actually have good results, but just give him that lack of conscience as a shooter would be...
Brain swap with Buddy. I think Buddy's the one.
Well, Buddy's not on the team. He'd have to consent to that, and I don't know that you're convincing somebody on the Indiana Pacers.
We could get an MBA-PA, kind of brain sharing agreement, I think. When it boils down to Toby, I am just such a fan of him as a person, as a professional. I just love the way he goes about his work. He definitely cares about this stuff too.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think he cares a little bit too much, though, and he just does not always have that lack of conscience. Here's a question for you guys. What do you think his next contract is going to be? We finally have gotten to the end of the big Tobias Harris contract. He is an expiring contract this year. But you mentioned not going to be as easy for the middle class in this new CBA. So what do you guys think he's roughly looking at? Let's say, I'll give you the years already. Let's say it's a 3-year deal somewhere.
66?
I was going to say 60. I think it depends on what sort of team he is willing to play for and play on. Does Tobias just want the biggest payday he can get? Like, he could go to, and I know he's already played for the Pistons, but a Detroit type team. And you say that, okay, this is a steady veteran. He's going to come in, do Tobias things. They already have this like young and up and coming talent. They might throw a bunch of money at him. Like, I don't think that'd be shocking. But I do think he wants to win. Like, I think he's about the right things generally.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I would say it probably ends up being less than that. Like, maybe he takes, I don't know, 3 for 45 or something like that. But there's no way of knowing.
I think the only reason, because like I look at the new CBA and all the rule changes and the double apron and the limitations. The only thing pushing against that and maybe making these contracts higher than I would expect is the fact that it is pretty much locked in that you're going to get 10% raises on the salary cap year over year over year. So maybe some teams are willing to gamble a little more than I think they will financially, but we'll see.
Well, there's one other element of this too, and that's, Daryl Morey has talked pretty openly that they have cap space aspirations last year.
They only have cap space if they let him walk.
Well, but then you look at the list of free agents for next season, and, I'm talking about the realistic free agents. Now, I know there was a question in the chat about, I believe Wendy had something about Kawhi and PG, and just mentioning, I think we're not aggregating our friend Wendy, but just, I'm sure he probably...
Wendy doesn't like being aggregated when he's not trying to be aggregated.
I'm sure he probably just mentioned, hey, the Sixers loom as a team that is a threat to them because they are a good team with cap space, which makes definitely a lot of sense. But if you look at the realistic free agents, so, you take the LeBron off the board, you take... PG and Kawhi off the board if they don't go free. Kind of the guys who are realistic. We've talked about Siakam and Anunoby. Tobias is not that far down that list.
Yep.
Which goes to show it's not the strongest free agent class in the world.
Actually, this is in my head because this was another guy who free agency came up recently. Would you rather pay Brandon Ingram the max or Tobias Harris, the type of deal we're talking about, like 3 for $60.
Tobias.
Yeah,
I am
probably Tobias.
This is my personal view. I am not a Brandon Ingram fan. I just think he's just a little too slow of a decision maker. And if you put the ball in his hands at all times, like the offense, I don't think is very good.
It's frustrating because he can come up with some pretty good passes, but it just takes a long time to get there. And you have a lot of dead possessions mixed in there as well. I would take Brandon Ingram as a player over Tobias.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if if it was the same contract, then yeah, give me Ingram. But I would probably be
and that's the problem. Like Brandon Ingram's going to go into free agency and demand.
He's good enough to get a contract.
That level of deal. And to the point you're making, I think if the Harden situation was better than it is right now, and you had James is the playmaker. You can take some of the burden of creation out of Ingram and Joel's hands. I could maybe see it then. You add this like guy who's a very good wing scorer with some other skills, but in a future where you're looking at like Joel and Maxey and Ingram, there's just not a lot of collective playmaking talent there, and I don't see how you create a playoff level offense that's good enough to win a title.
When you look at outside of Paul George, when you look at almost every other free agent that they could realistically get, there's not a lot of playmakers out there. I don't know how they really...
There's a comment. Ingram always looks like he just got out of a VW bus with Cheech and Chong. It's got a little bit of the sleepy eyes, we'll call them. Yeah,
it's not too far off. I would agree with that.
But yeah, that is one of the real concerns you have with free agency is there's just not a high-level playmaker out there outside of Paul George, and those guys never play.
And part of it is kind of our personal experience and what we valued just watching the Sixers. Josh Richardson was the perfect example of this. Like, decent player. I know his star has fallen in recent years, but I just can't deal with slow decision makers anymore around Embiid. Embiid has his limitations as a playmaker, but he's such a good player that you're going to build around him regardless. You just need guys that make quick passes and stuff like that. And I feel like if you put the ball in Ingram's hands, he likes to probe, he likes to get in the mid-range.
At least he can dribble. That's not something you could say about most of the people who've been employed by the Philadelphia 76ers recently. So
he's talented. This is not really a shot against him. And I think it does go to show, the options are not that great this summer right now. Now, let me ask you, if PG and Kawhi come free, that's obvious, right?
I think you have to. I wouldn't love it just because
you'd be nervous about it. But when you talk about pathways that have realistic championship upside, even if they're low probability, like there aren't that many pathways.
I'd rather gamble on those guys and the health, like the 7 games we'd see Joel and Kawhi play together in the regular season. Then, throw a max at an Ingram who I just don't think is ever going to get.
They'd be magnificent 7 games.
Unbelievable.
The opponents would be fucked for those 7 games.
Like, I remember the big comeback the Sixers had against the Clippers last year that I thought was one of their better single half performances of the entire season. There was a stretch of that game where I was just like, how the fuck is anybody going to beat the Clippers in a series? Like, if these guys are healthy, they went on a run where I was just staring there in awe of what was going on. The shooting, the isolation scoring. Kawhi is in total robot mode again. That's staggering. The fact that they haven't achieved more than they have so far is just, obviously it's mostly health, but it's just crazy to me.
It really does show it's really hard. Even if you have the best offseason imaginable, there's so many different ways this can all go sideways. And the Sixers are very creative in the ways that they've found to go sideways, whereas the Clippers is a little more traditional. They're just not healthy. But it is tough. It is tough.
We have seen many players throughout our time covering the Sixers, and when we're at the Sixers games at the Wells Fargo Center, we are right behind the basket, which is pretty cool. I have never seen a guy where, as an opponent, he would just make you feel helpless, like Kawhi Leonard, just robot mid-range jumper after mid-range jumper and just creating the space. And we've seen it. Kawhi hasn't been healthy, but I feel like we've seen that even a couple of times after his times with the Raptors. I don't know what you do. Like, it was Tobias, it was PJ guarding him, and I was just like, that's pretty good defense. I don't know what you do. He's just a great player. Did you guys see though, over the weekend, Kawhi went to the Colorado football game.
I did. I couldn't believe you made a public appearance.
And all the tweets were, man, he doesn't even show up at Clippers games. Getting Deion Sanders really has something cooking here.
Coach Prime, man. He's the center of the sports universe right now.
All right. If you have any questions in the chat, please drop us. We'll try to get to a couple there in the last segment. Before then, a quick word from Foco. Foco is a leading manufacturer of sports and entertainment merchandise with a product line that includes apparel, accessories, toys, collectibles, novelty items, and more. Kyle, stop it. It's the best officially licensed gear for all sports and fandoms. We are now squarely in football season and tailgating season, which means that it's time for overalls, hoodies, hats, sunglasses, bags, everything you need for a game. Foco has hooked PHLY up and provided awesome pieces for our sets. Foco always has our back for Philly sports, and they have yours too. Get the best gear around by using the link in our description. For all non-presale items, use a promo code PHLY for 10% off.
Vanna Neubeck over here, just trying to add to the visual element of our ad read for Derek.
Yeah, I guess any other quick thoughts on Tobias before we go to the...
Well, I guess, do you either of you guys see anything in how Nurse sets up his teams that's going to get him going specifically?
Well, I think if you're looking at a player in kind of his recent iterations of the Raptors, it would be Siakam, right? Like getting him ISOs at the top of the key. I think a lot of the times he would try and get Siakam kind of off like a dribble handoff, so he would have one of those slippery drives, which, by the way, a slippery drive where one of the right elbows is
mean elbows,
is just going through the lane. But one of those type of things. I mean, look, in truth, I am very curious what Nick Nurse's offense looks like, because they've talked a somewhat big game of, okay, we're going to try and do things differently here. I think of him much more as a defensive coach at this point. But, I think he is another coach who, if you have a decent kind of wing ISO player, he will get him the ball. I just don't know how creative that will be.
Yeah. I was going to say, Derek, you got anything over there?
No, I mean, we talked about this before where like he will empower players who maybe are imperfect ISO or pick and roll options. Certainly, I think you could see that with Tobias, who's, better than some of the options he's empowered before. Like I would rather have Tobias in a pick and roll than OG. So, yeah, I think we'll see a little more of it. I just don't think it's going to I don't think Tobias's main problems are scheme related right now.
You brought up OG. I want to touch on him really quickly. Somebody that I think is a very good player. I think he's massively overrated, the way he's spoken about right now.
The offense certainly is.
Yeah, defensively, as good as it gets perimeter-wise in the NBA. You can throw him at basically any matchup. But, yeah, if he's one of the top free agents next offseason, I think that's kind of damning for the rest of the class, I would say.
He is, honestly, on a championship team, he has to be a fourth option. He has to be...
And he doesn't want to be. That's his whole problem, I think.
It's just, God, you put a pick and roll in his hands. It's so mechanical. It's really tough to watch. So I agree, but he is one of those top 5 free agents as of now, at least the guys who can realistically break free, I think.
He's about as natural in a pick and roll as I am with an ad read.
Or with your feet, as we learned when you were kicking over water on the set yesterday.
You'll notice my water today has a cap on it. Very deliberate. Very deliberate.
Let me ask, if you could pick one, let's say they both wanted to come to Philadelphia. Let's say Steve Ballmer's like, I am out of the Kawhi Leonard and Paul George business. If you had to pick, which one?
I think George is a more natural fit, but I think Kawhi is a better player.
I think you have to go Kawhi because you're going for the ceiling, right? You're trying to get them out of this box that they're in, where I think even like the 90th percentile Paul George outcome, I'm still pretty dubious that if you get now the likelihood of getting the 90th percentile Kawhi option is probably much lower just because of the degenerative effect of all these injuries and problems that he's had. But I think you got to shoot for the moon. I think it has to be Kawhi if they had their choice of either one.
I agree with that, and I think it's a pretty easy choice. Although I will say, the off-court stuff with Kawhi and just kind of the general vibe he gives your team when he's not playing, I think has at least made it worthwhile to add.
We'd also have, if they brought Paul George in, we'd have a podcast competitor and
we already do.
Well, I guess
How many podcasts do they have? Pat Bev, right? Danny.
I'm saying we'll have another one.
Yeah.
in the charts right now, we're pretty close to Paul George. So, we
don't need that kind of heat.
I don't want that in-town competition. If he wants to do it over there in LA, I think that's fine. But having to do that with Paul George on the team and covering him, I think that's a different story. I think it looks like we have a few questions. Randy's asking what Buddy's cost is, Buddy Hield, and if that's more of a third team in a Harden deal or a pick, or I don't know. I guess that's hard to say. He is on an expiring deal, and teams now know that they want to get rid of him essentially. So I don't think it would be too much. It depends on if you're willing to trade an actual rotation guy now, because I do think Indiana wants to get better right now. They want to compete while they have Halliburton and Turner, and they're not on the full rebuild anymore.
Yeah, I mean, if it costs more than Tobias, then you're just out. Like if the team's
no
going to offer a pick
picks,
for a rental,
Yep. Their backcourt is getting more crowded too with
Mathurin,
and then they signed Bruce Brown over the summer too.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys. I don't know exactly which position he plays. You can play him at small ball 5 with the right crew, and considering the way Indiana's roster construction is, I'm sure Carlisle is going to play him in some weird configurations. But yeah, I can see that they are motivated to move him just because there are probably guys they want to play more than him.
Agreed. Let's see. We have a question from, is that Dargs? If Harden holds out and we have to run with our current roster, what's our ceiling? And we've gotten into that a lot. It really depends on Tyrese, right?
Yeah.
If Tyrese is the same guy that he was or say similar-ish to last year, we're probably like a 50-ish win team with him and Joel. They could probably beat a mediocre to bad team in round 1, depending on how seeding shakes out, and any real competitor or contender would blow their doors off.
The problem is if they're limited to 47 to 50 wins, might they not get that?
Right,
bad?
they could end up in a tough 4-5 or 3-6, and then that becomes like, let's just say, look at last year. Let's say they play the Cavs in round 1. Cavs are in that like 4th seed-ish territory. If the Sixers without Harden and it's just the Tyrese Joel show play Cleveland, I think certainly Joel has shown he can beat up on those front court guys, but the matchups everywhere else are not favorable for them.
I'm pretty high on their ceiling without Harden. Just I'm high in that I think it's a pretty narrow thing. Like it's like I think they'll be within the 3 to 6 range. Like they will avoid the play-in. Yeah. And I think that they would have a chance to win the first round too, just because we've shown that the difference between first round teams, second round teams, especially when you are in that top 4, is a big difference. I mean, does it matter? Like, are they actually taking a shot at a championship if they do that? Absolutely not. But I do think like one of the things that has been maybe a little bit underrated about this era of Sixers basketball, and I understand why people don't care anymore because they've seen it year after year after year, is they have the regular season figured out. Like they have a pretty high floor with Embiid and with Maxey and with all these guys. So like they wouldn't be bad unless Joel got hurt. I would definitely say that.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see. This one from Sam from England. Who, in your opinion, will be the third scorer because he doesn't think it would be Harris? I think it would be Harris.
I was going to say, I disagree with you, Sam. I do think it would be Harris. I mean, he's shown that he can be that guy. I think Nick Nurse coming in is probably going to look at it and say he's the most obvious candidate, right? Because he simply has done it before, and you'd rather have a guy you can bank on than, hey, maybe let's turn DeAnthony Melton or somebody, or Terquavion Smith, or just pick a name out of a hat could be the next guy.
There is a 20-point per game scorer that they just acquired this week.
No, stop.
No. Well,
stop. If he gets enough shots for that, then there's gonna be a lot of angry Derek on the pods. Final one here from RC. If Harden doesn't play, who runs a point? And I think this one's pretty easy. I think it's going to be Maxey. Nick Nurse has already spoken about how he wants to put him in more pick and rolls to grow that aspect of his game. So we'll shift that to who will be the backup point. Pat Bev, DeAnthony,
honestly,
Paul.
I think it's got to be Melton because Pat Bev just
is not getting the ball off the court.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's. I guess you try Melton at first.
He might not get the ball off the court either. I don't know. Harden has really helped me hone in on this over the past few years. Teams now have one guy pressure and say like, look, defense is hard enough, but if the guy is slow and maybe he's a really good playmaker, but his dribbling is not great, he's not fast, we are going to pressure him 94 feet.
Yes.
Because it's a pain in the ass to get it over in 8 seconds. Outside of Maxey, it's like kind of interesting for the Sixers. I don't love who their options are. And I'll tell you, Doc Rivers last year a couple of times would say it too. He's like, man, we just got to get into our offense. Like, once we get there, it's fine. But I don't know. Pat Bev, and maybe you say that they should have signed a kind of a more natural backup point guard at some point. But
well, listen, this is gonna be insane. Before I even say it, I'm gonna continue to buy low on Turk. I don't think he can be an actual point guard, and he's better off as a off-ball guy.
He can advance the ball at least.
He can dribble, and so I think if he's in the game, he's at least like a sort of in that Shake Milton shared responsibility tier, right? You put him and another, like him and D'Anthony or him and Furk or whoever it is, and they just say, we don't have an actual point guard, but we're going to divvy up the responsibility. I think maybe he gets some chances in that capacity.
And that's like, I'm seeing TJ comments in the chat. TJ had plenty of flaws as a player, but he would get you into your offense. Like he could get you to do that. So.
He could dribble the ball from the baseline to the opposing team's 3-point line and then give it up to somebody else.
It is stunning how they have almost avoided that skill set for the entirety of Joel Embiid's run. It's pretty stunning. You mentioned that Jason Richardson. Josh Richardson. Well, Jason
they
too.
Did
Jason
have Jason as well,
yeah.
just to be clear.
But with that lineup, oh my God, that was so tough to watch. I don't understand some of the team building decisions. It's been frustrating.
We did also have a non-basketball from Gavin asked who got to pick their seat first in the studio. I will say I did, but it was not because I have any kind of authority. It's because I went to Australia and I've had swimmers here for basically the entire time since I came back. So this year I can only sort of hear out of. And so Derek and Rich have been nice enough to talk into my good side over here. So thank you to you both for.
We are aware enough to recognize we don't necessarily have good size aesthetically, but in terms of hearing, Kyle does have a good side.
Yeah, I have the good hearing side. And so that was priority number one here.
I think that's probably just about all that I have, unless there's another question that jumps out.
No, I think, we'll probably catch everybody tomorrow. We'll have
not probably. I assume we'll catch everybody
well,
tomorrow.
I hope everybody's back tomorrow. Obviously, if you're still...
Wait, we had an option?
If you're still here with us, thank you guys. We see some of you guys every day, which I love that. See Miles, we see Randy, RC, like a lot of these names are becoming... See Sam from England, obviously, anyone watching from England, we love you. Seeing the similar names, same names every day, getting to build something is very cool. So, obviously, if you haven't already, as I always harp on Derek for, hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up. That helps us very much on YouTube. And, gentlemen, I'll talk to you later.
Sounds good.
Sounds good, man. See you.
We all silly like the mayor.